Hi everyone, and welcome to an episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the co-founder here at Trident, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Karl Sharman, head of talent at Forgepoint Capital. Hey, Karl.
Hey, how are we doing, Josh? Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, really good, mate. Thanks for taking the time. Karl, as you know, we're doing this kind of series within our Trident Talks YouTube channel, which is all directed around venture capital, some private equity firms as well, but more VCs, and particularly focused on kind of the discussion points around the relationship between the partners or talent teams in the VCs, and also and then the portfolio sort of within the companies within the portfolios, but all around the talent piece. So the labor, right? We've discussed it many times that the capital piece is done really well. There's a proper industry, seed, series A, B, C, acquisitions, etc. But the labor side isn't discussed enough. So would you mind just kind of giving the audience a bit of an intro on who you are, your background, and then we'll kind of lead into what you're doing at Forgepoint?
Yeah, good. That'll only take 20 minutes, Josh. Of course. Yeah, I mean, I'm the head of talent at Forgepoint Capital. About 10 years I was working in the soccer industry, or the football industry, for the UK. For the UK listeners and viewers of
what
this.
You say.
Yeah, I have to remember where I am. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, I did scouting. So basically what you call talent spotting, of young players, right the way up to first teams. Anywhere it's, spent 6 years at Southampton, with the great academy that they have. And then in 2017, after nearly 10 years of working in that industry, I made the pivot to cybersecurity recruitment. No different to obviously what you do, Josh, right? In that respect, and did that for 6 years before moving into the VC world as Forgepoint Capital being a leader in cybersecurity investments. And we made the partnership at Forgepoint made the deliberate decision to back really two major areas, which is go to market and talent, because they're the two successful vectors that have made many companies successful. If we really think about it, every company, no matter if it's a product company or services company, is very people led. Everything is about the people, no matter no matter even if you're building products, still very people led. How we assess the companies, why we invest in them, and then obviously why they get to exit. So it's really, really important to always be thinking about go to market, but also really fundamentally talent in that respect.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Thanks for the intro. Let's take it back. Southampton. Were you personally responsible for finding Theo Walcott, Chamberlain, Bale, or like the no?
No, I'm not that old, firstly. So, they're
about our age, aren't they?
Yeah. I would have been a kid, I think, scouting some of them. But I mean, fundamentally, I was there when Luke Shaw, James Ward-Prowse, I think, James Ward-Prowse was U15 when I was there. He came through and graduated during the 6 years I was there. Luke Shaw, Callum Chambers, there's been many players that have come through over the years. Harrison Reed, obviously now at Fulham. So there was so many great players that we were produced, and probably the last name before them realistically was Oxlade. Oxlade-Chamberlain came through. So when I came through, it was the rise from League One, where they had some bad years. They dropped down to League One, had the points deduction. Nigel Adkins came in. I came in about the same time into the academy, and then we had the rise to the Premier League. So it was my favorite experience in soccer. I have a very soft spot, despite being a Fulham supporter. I have a very soft spot for Southampton Football Club, and I hope they get back up this year, because I still have a number of friends there, and we had a great time and produced many players during that period. And it's very hard. We unfortunately lost Rod Ruddock, who actually found Gareth Bale. We lost him in the last 12 months, and he was a mentor of a lot of us in the scouting department, because he'd found Gareth Bale and many of the other players that had come through at that point. But there's not many scouts that now operate like that as they used to 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's more of a team effort. We all do reports. We all were doing, we all had a hand on that. They would have a different coach every year. So it's very different to how it was where one person really found them. Now it's a group, it's a team.
Yeah.
And that really allowed me to understand, the importance of high performance environments and the importance of the team environments, which is a lot, which actually I take into what we do now. So a lot of the stuff that makes Forgepoint so different is because I take a lot of what I learned in the sports arena and take that into the cybersecurity arena, which I think is just as has a lot of similarities, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. So talking about kind of fast forward now to your time at Forgepoint, so you're head of talent. What does that mean? What do you do? Because it's not. I believe it's going to become more common, and we can come on to that. But it's not so common in some of the kind of, let's say, more up and coming VCs or smaller funds, in terms of having the luxury of having someone like you internally. What do you do there?
That's a really good question. We sort of had to design the role, I think, in that
Yeah.
respect, right? I think everyone has their own interpretation of what that means. So for some VCs, it's just pure recruitment. Some VCs is just vendor management, and some
Okay.
VCs is a lot more extensive than that. I'm not one person that likes sitting still, so we designed 3 areas to focus on, which is talent acquisition, um, people management, and performance management. So you dip in
Okay.
between the HR and the talent and the people part. So a lot of the people that I'm working with is chief people officers, head of HRs, head of talent, and then sometimes the founder and entrepreneur itself. So, so I have a lot of different relationships to manage across our current 36 portfolio. And really for me, what I'm trying to do is build the tribes out in these areas and be able to add value. So a lot of the things I do is consultancy based because I spend a number of hours with the portfolio looking at their org charts, looking
Yeah.
at how they should, what their equity pool should look like. How do we, where do we pay? Where do we put these people from a cost perspective? We do a lot of problem solving for that, and that's really how we add value. The other thing that we do on the more talent side is I still do a lot of searches, so
Hmm.
yes, we go out to outside firms. Absolutely, we always need that support because I can't work with all 36 running multiple searches as on my
Yeah.
own. But we have a large ecosystem and large network. Forgepoint have been in this industry since 2015, and several of the partnership have been in the cybersecurity space long before that. If you think about where Forgepoint really came from, it was from Alien Vault being so successful and selling to AT&T a number of years ago now. So they've been in this ecosystem a long while. They're very well connected, and that allows us to add a lot more value at board level, but right the way down to very strategic hires.
And they're the name of Trident Capital before.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I looked at the domain still taken, so I'll message the guys for me. I could take that domain off them. So what I really like though, I'm listening to kind of how your roles evolved, and and I'm not saying you were just a recruiter in your previous kind of agency life. Obviously not. You were way more consultative than that, right? As you wouldn't have kind of landed this role and made it your own and worked at a partnership to kind of build that strategy, right? Because it is so new. But it's interesting to see like the performance side comes from the sports, the
Mm.
talent acquisition comes from your agency's life, and then the commerciality of understanding how to kind of link them all together and actually work with CEOs, work with chief people officers. It's just kind of all of that combined. We try so much here, and I spoke about this recently in a podcast around
Yeah.
like I don't train recruiters on how to recruit. That's pretty easy, right? Almost the barrier of entry to recruit is pretty low. It's about the commerciality and actually understanding why it's important to a CEO to build a people framework from day one, why it's important to put as silly as it sounds, like a referral scheme in place so you can get more referral hires because then that builds the culture that you want initially, and also why it's important to hire the misfits at the start and the builders, then the scalers, etc. Right? It's so important. But it's interesting how you've kind of taken that recruiter from an agency to one step further to be able to now advise and consult to like founders who've probably done it before as well, right? I'm sure you've got companies
Yeah.
in the portfolio that's like second time founders, third time, that are kind of, they know what they're doing, right? But you can still add a lot of value consulting with them or at least their C-suite team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose if you look at the values of the entrepreneur founding teams or executive teams that we back, you know, learning and curiosity is often one of our highest values
Yeah.
that we seek out, right? We want people that don't come in thinking they know it all, that they're very
Yeah.
understanding that they need more experts in the room. I'm a big believer in that. I never want to be the smartest person in the room because I always want to be able to learn. And I believe that you can learn off anyone. And I think that's how we really invest, right? So they very much understand that I add value that maybe they don't understand, right? I have a very unique view of the market and things that I built like sec moves and other
Yeah.
data pools that we do, you know, like I said, I took all my soccer experience of how we measure players and how we analyze players on a global scale, and we're now building that into Forgepoint in terms of the way we do things. So we have some very unique offerings that gets their buy-in very quickly. But I think it comes from the mentality of the executive teams and the entrepreneurs and the founders really in our ecosystem that really do that. And that's why we will reinvest in them people, not necessarily because they were successful. Not everyone can be successful, but if they've got the right values and the right principles, we are more likely to be able to work with that founder and really add value to them. And then we can start then helping them build out their executive team and achieving, you know, what they want to do from an exit perspective.
Yeah, it comes down to coachability, right? Regardless of how
Correct.
successful or your track record or history. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I totally 100% agree. Do you feel, or can you see this being more common inside the VCs? Correct me if I'm wrong, if it's already an established kind of element of most VCs. I don't see it often, not from my market kind of insight. But do you see it's becoming more common? Like, because almost like you're building the proof of concept for most VCs in the US and Europe.
Uh, that's a really good question.
It's a big
I'd
investment,
say,
isn't it, for the VC? That's what yeah.
yeah, of course, it's an investment because you know the only way you make money in a VC is through really an exit, right? Like that's
Correct.
really how you make money, right? So yes, it's not like we built a recruitment company internally. Some have. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I think it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, you know, I
Yep.
suppose in that, but I don't blame them for doing that because they do save the portfolio a lot of money. So, you know, there's definitely that. And that's one of the metrics that obviously I'm measured on is, you know, if we can save the portfolio money here by me doing the search, where can we reuse that money? And
Course.
that's where I really can add value. But I think ultimately there's some really good mentors of mine who are heads of talent at other VCs who are doing some very great things. And we all talk and we all sit in the same network and we try and spend as much time together because everyone has different experiences, and that's how we build a lot of our companies, is that cognitive diversity.
Mhm.
And because I've come from a sports background, I know some of the other heads of talent who have come from an executive search background. I haven't really come from that. I've done a lot of them, but
Mhm.
I wasn't brought up in that way. You know, there's other people that have come from more of a volume game. There's other people that came down from the HR route that have a very different experience line to me, who was chief people officer at other companies and then they come in there. So we all have different experiences across the VCs, but this has been I want to call it a phenomenon over the previous probably 5 years,
Yep.
where a lot more of the VCs have started hiring these people as well as the go-to-market expertise, because as I said to you initially, they're the two biggest areas that can add the most value, that can give you the biggest return. And that's
Mhm.
where the VCs are focused on. So VCs don't mind having these value add growth teams, whatever they want to call them,
Yep.
as long as they really do that. And it's also a unique selling point for us when we're competing for the right term sheet or the right company to
Yeah.
work with, you know, that we can offer them this. So that's part of my process as well, is that I'm not just working on post investment, I'm working pre-investment from a due diligence perspective, but also, you know, to really show how we can add value.
So you'll get involved in the due diligence piece around, can you come in and measure performance of the teams? Can you have a look at kind of longevity of each, or how they hire, and then what's the people kind of framework internally that we're going to invest in, right? Because if that's dysfunctional, then we've got to rip out and bring in a new one, etc. So you'll get brought into that as well, not just looking after the portcos later on.
I think it's really important, right? You
Yeah.
know, I think a lot of VCs have made mistakes because 5 to 10 years ago, they would just go, well, who's the CEO? And we would just look at the
Yeah.
CEO. And it's a lot bigger than that now, right? You need to understand who's the CRO, who's the CTO, who's the chief product officer. And even more so when you go further down the line, like Series A, Series B, and even Series C, you want to know who's the next level, because they're probably the successors from that. So if something goes wrong and the CTO goes, I don't want to be here anymore and I'm going to quit, what's the succession plan? Well, that's the person under them, the VP of engineering, let's say, right? So there's the constant evaluation of that talent. Like, so we're looking at a lot of key metrics. Who are they? You know, what's their background? Because we want cognitive diversity. If they've all come from the same environment, it's a concern for us. You know, we're looking at like their values, so we try and meet as many of them as we can, as many of the executive team and under that as we can. The next thing is like looking at where did they fail, what are their successes, because I think for us it's like, you know, we've backed people from a certain type of environment and it hasn't worked, and we're very aware of that. We learn a lot. We treat this as like the aviation industry does in terms of
the black box thinking.
Exactly, very much so. So we always operate on that respect. So we very much go, this was successful because X, Y, and Z. This was a failure because of X, Y, and Z. And we learn that and we take that into the due diligence process. But for me, everything is about talent. So it's assessing the people, their background, their experience of scaling and startup experience and successes and failures. And then the final thing for me is just working out, how does this look? So like, you know, does this actually have the right balance? So often we see a lot of companies, especially in cyber, very engineering heavy. So I can very quickly tell you that, hey, you know, we've got some issues here, whether it's a retention issue, whether it's you know, structure's one-sided, whether they're paying too much because they do. I'm able to then alert the investment team as that, because I sit as part of that team. I'm very lucky that Alberto and the team have trusted me to be able to do that. And then I can give my viewpoint to every deal. That's the great thing about Forgepoint. Unlike some other you know, venture capital firms, everyone has a seat at the table and is in the room where it happens, as I like to say. And you know, I'm very grateful for that trust and that perspective, because I bring a different view to it from some of the investment team or some of the former operators that we have, because I'm very talent focused. I don't look at anything else. So, and we do have assessment frameworks. We have a lot of tools that we use, and then we are able to, you know, bring out reports, bring out data points to be able to help the investment team make the right decision.
Nice. Very, very impressive. Sounds like you made a really good move. Obviously very grateful for it as well, but also a lot's on your shoulders to build that function for yourself and to support all the portfolio companies. Look, I won't take up any more of your time. Really appreciate you coming on, kind of giving some insights and kind of sharing kind of what actually goes on underneath the hood, rather than what we see on a website or on LinkedIn, right? Yeah, really appreciate it, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. All the best.